All right, you ready?
My name is Clinton Elmore. I'm video production specialist for the School of Journalism at the University of Tennessee, where I wear many hats. Well, as part of my responsibilities, I am the director of the Volunteer Channel, which is a student media organization. We do everything from hard news to we have a comedy sketch show called Unwarranted. I'm also assistant director of the Land-Grant Films. With both of those, I advise students and faculty in various video production tasks. I also teach at the University of Tennessee. I teach video production and creative writing for the School of Journalism and Electronic Media. I have a bachelor's degree in cinema studies and moving image production, and I also have a master's in communications with an emphasis in journalism. When I returned to the University of Tennessee, I was actually in my 30s, and I had a plan. And my original plan was to finish off my English degree. I wanted to actually finish my English degree so that I would have a degree and I could get more money. While I was doing it, I couldn't get some of the classes I wanted, so just on a lark, I took a cinematography as art class and an introduction to cinema studies. Ended up winning a film art award. Realized that I'd found what I wanted to do, and so I just switched everything and started throwing together, like graphing out what I wanted to do. One of the reasons I put off going to college, originally I took the gap year because I was just tired of being told I had to go to school. But when I originally had started to go back, my grandparents had just fallen ill, and so I put that off and I moved in with them for a while. They eventually recovered, but after losing my other two grandparents, I didn't want to miss out on the end of their lives. In 2003, I was on my way to work, and we were pulling out at a stoplight, and we were third in line, and this truck, the guy was reading a map. Literally reading a map and ran it. Initially, I was basically bedridden for about 6 months, but I got out. I was able to walk at the time, but there's just so much pain. I ended up going back to work, ended up losing the job because I wasn't ready to go back to work. After the wreck, I lost the first job because of it, and then ended up doing tech support for another internet provider, and I realized pretty quickly that ironically, I realized at that time that sitting around all day in front of a computer that was not going to be for me. I knew my back just would hurt all the time, and so I decided then I was going to go back to school. I didn't actually find out how bad my back was until I was at UT. That was 2012. Lisa had surgery, and I was helping her get up out of a chair, which didn't seem that much, but I felt an odd twinge in my back. And usually when my back was a little gimpy, I'd just ride my exercise bike for 15, 20 minutes. And after that, it felt even more gimpy, and I went and I sat down, and the minute I sat down, it was like a lightning bolt of nerve pain up and down my back, and it just never went away. That's what led to the wheelchair, the accident in 2012. Well, not the accident, but the sitting down in my chair. Come to find out, not only do I have an extra L vertebra, I have an L6, which is very uncommon, but it does happen. The X-ray tech actually put L5 obliterated. Suddenly finding yourself in a wheelchair, I actually only missed like 2 classes due to that. I'd spent so much time and effort to get back into school, I didn't want to fail. I'd just been accepted into the college scholars, well, to truly understand why the college scholars really meant something to me is, back when I first came to UT back in 94. Everything was going fine, and then my car got towed. And over the course of 2 semesters my car got towed and I just dropped out of college, so that my GPA was like in the toilet. When I came back to UT, my GPA was bad enough that I was on academic review. As I was taking classes and I discovered I wanted to be a filmmaker, I'd outlined everything I wanted to do. Well, all the classes I had to take. It's like, okay, I need to take these acting classes so I can understand how how to deal with actors, video production classes, and these writing classes. When I laid this all out, my academic advisor, Missy Parker, was like, you should apply for college scholars. She's like, the only real problem is your GPA isn't good enough right now. And she said, you've got 2 semesters to get it up. At the time, you had to apply before the end of your sophomore year. I was like, well, I think I can do that. I went from a 2.16 to over a 3-point GPA in 1 semester. The next semester, my GPA was up over the minimum requirement, or was going to be at the end of the semester, and they accepted me.
Well, my name is Jeffrey Kovac, and I am Professor of Chemistry Emeritus at the University of Tennessee and Director of the College Scholars Program. I became Director of College Scholars in the fall of 2011. Clinton Elmore had just been admitted to the program, so I got to know him as someone in the seminar. Insofar as I help anyone through the program, I help guide him through to his degree some years later. Clint is a very bright guy who had very good grades in College Scholars, quite a creative program in filmmaking, but he had some health problems during that time. He had hurt his back, gained some weight, and for a number of months he was in a wheelchair. Well, he was pretty depressed about it, as anybody would be, and I think there were times he thought he ought to give up. But one of the things that I did, I think, for him was to keep encouraging him and to make it possible for him to participate fully. I knew he had talent, and I didn't want him to fail. I didn't want him to drop out of the program. I didn't want him to drop out of school, and I did what I could to support him psychologically, financially through scholarships, help with his senior project. When he got this job and took over the volunteer channel, he told me that he hoped he could do as much for the students who worked for the volunteer channel and were in his classes as I did for the College Scholars.
Over the course of the first 6 months when I was in the wheelchair, I put on nearly 300 pounds. I went from like 260 to around 500. And I went from moving and being constantly in motion to just nothing, and the weight just piled on. I can't explain to you what it feels like to have pain keep you up until you can't actually stay awake any longer. I mean, it was literal torture. Sleep for 30 minutes and wake up because you accidentally moved in your sleep and you're in a bad angle. Well, that constant torture was starting to get to me. I promised myself that if I didn't lose down to 300 pounds and could get it off as fast as I possibly can, that I was going to kill myself on my birthday. I didn't commit suicide because I basically I wouldn't say a starvation diet, but I cut down to about 1,600 calories a day. By the time that I graduated, I was down to about 200 and I want to say 40 pounds. So in about 2 years, I lost 250 pounds. And then I went on to lose most of that too. I mean, almost another 100 pounds after that. I had a near full mental breakdown when I was finishing up my master's and went to therapy. And my therapist told me, like, you suffer from depression, and that it, basically caused all the symptoms I was going through at the time. I was raging out. I was subjected to a fair amount of early life trauma. I mean, I watched both my grandparents die of cancer when I was 9 years old. Was also sexually molested a couple of times, and didn't really, I don't know, I almost feel like, especially earlier on, I don't know if it was a disconnect. I was young enough through most of it. I don't think I put the negative connotations to it. I mean, it was the perpetrators were always smooth enough where it never felt like it was happening to me, but that I was part of the game. Watching my dad ruthlessly abuse my mom, and he occasionally would hit us, but I mean, I was mainly sheltered from it compared to my brother and my mom. It's weird. Back when we were little kids, back when the mom was being abused, at the time I was both protective but also annoyed. I mean, anybody that's had younger siblings probably understands. It's like, yeah, I love him, but God, it gets on my nerves. We would get whippings if we were caught awake and talking after a certain time, but he couldn't sleep unless I'd tell him bedtime stories. And I used to tell him bedtime stories. I think he was about 10 or 11 before those stopped. I mean, he was just always around. He was just a fixture. I mean, it was, you know, to be honest, up until about 10 years ago, he was. I saw him about as much as I did like my arm. You know, I mean, we lived with each other way past when we moved out. When I moved in my own apartment, he ended up moving in with me, and then moved in his girlfriend, and then they stayed together. And then he moved in when I moved in with Lisa. He broke up with his girlfriend, and he ended up living with us for a while. And so, I mean, I probably spent 3/4 of my life waking up with him in the same house. How many brothers and sisters can say that? He wasn't just my brother. I mean, he was my brother in arms too. So, I mean, we saw a lot of crap together. When I came back to school, it wasn't just because of my condition. He had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and his health was not that great at the time. And my niece and nephew were young enough that I saw that if he wasn't going to be able to work, I needed to stop fucking around and make something of myself. One of the reasons I went back to school was so that I could create a nest egg for them. You know, fast forward from, 10 years later, 9 years later, I thought everything was fine. I mean, my brother's condition had gotten fairly under control. And at that time, I was like, and did enough studying on gastroparesis. It's not a death sentence like we originally thought. But then his wife committed suicide, and he started going downhill fast. He started doing heroin. He started doing whatever he could get his hands on. He moved out of his house because that's where she died, and moved in with us. And just the reckless behavior and watching the dependency on drugs, change him in front of me was difficult. It was torturous. I mean, he planned on committing suicide, but that was what he was doing. My brother was kind of like me. He was tough. He had a bad back too, and had a degenerative disc disease, and landscaped for a living. Had his own landscaping company. One of the most painful things I ever watched was that quick, crumbling of the person I knew, the person who's my best friend, to the secretive person who's, just coming up with silly little reasons why he needs $25. That broke my heart in ways that I can't even describe. I went into such a dark funk over that. I mean, dealing with her death was so easy compared to dealing with what happened to him afterward. It just kept me in a dark place the entire time. So I think having responsibilities in a way is a blessing. It can be a curse when you're in the deepest part of that funk. I've got one of the best jobs in the world because no 2 days are the same. It became kind of a shelter from the craziness of my life. It's one of those things, anyone who's dealt with, I think, depression for a long time, or at least for me, it's going to suck no matter what, so you might as well do the thing that gets you further along than where you're at right now. One of the things I've done to try to lessen the pain is I actually got a tattoo recently. It's always fun for me. This is the first tattoo I've ever gotten that was therapeutic. Never been a big fan of dragon tattoos. I mean, I think that, I've seen some beautiful dragon tattoos, but for me, I'm more of Egyptian mythos. It felt cool getting a dragon tattoo because my brother had over 15 dragon tattoos. He had a ridiculous number of dragon tattoos. I'm getting used to not thinking about him. But when I think about him, it's still fresh. I don't pretend to be wise, but be present in everything you're doing. Don't plan on, it's okay to have plans, like I'm gonna do this and hope it gets me here, but if you're present when you're there and doing it, then what comes next doesn't matter, because it's those moments when you're actually living your life that matter.